Hello and welcome. I am a storyteller and this is a beginning to a world building project for tabletop RPGs called World of Atlantica. Now, Atlantica is a setting that is being designed to be system agnostic in certain respects. That is to say, it's useful for multiple sets of rules, and on a practical level, what that means is that the NPCs discussed in this episode and subsequent episodes are going to be made with Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules. But the new character class options that we discuss are actually designed for use with old school essentials or possibly other OSR games for those rule sets. Now, for this video, the stats for 5 NPCs are discussed, and those stats you can get them by following the link below to the World of Atlantica Discord channel. Now, in addition, rules for 3 new class options for old school essentials will likewise be available. And so too will you can also get a continent map and 4 different hex maps. So with that said, as a fantasy setting, Atlantica is in some ways very similar to other fantasy settings. But the biggest difference that you'll find is, a lot of tropes are going to have been turned on their heads. You'll find that in both this episode and many subsequent episodes. But beyond that, Atlantica is defined by an endless sea of magic, known to its inhabitants as the Mar. Now, the Mar is not quite a gas, it's not quite a liquid. Sometimes it's green, but often it's purple. It shimmers sometimes, often changing colors as it shimmers. Sometimes flashing lights streak through the Mar, like lightning, but often in all colors. Sometimes in every color. Occasionally in epileptic colors. Just below its surface, energies crackle through its ethereal semi-substance, like rainbows of lightning through the sky, but with no accompanying thunder, because while the Mar is alive, unpredictable, and life-creating, it makes no sound. There is no roar to the crash of the green and purple ethereal waves against the rocky shorelines of Atlantica. There is no fizzle as its wispy tendrils exhaust themselves in the air above its mass. The waves of the Mar just seem to evaporate against the land, often softly, sometimes violently, but always silently. Now, Atlantica is completely covered in Mar as a planet or a plane. All of the lands, the continents, the islands, as well as all of the oceans of Atlantica, they all rest upon a bed of Mar. And in fact, even accounting for the land and the water, more than 50% of the surface simply is Mar. Beyond that, what makes Atlantica special is that all of the magic in the world is derived from plants grown in marmud, which is a mixture of soil and the Mar itself, which can give plants magical properties. Now, there are some places in the world where marmud naturally occurs, but in addition to these naturally occurring places, specialized farmers obtain the Mar and mix it with soil to create marmud for magical gardens around the world. And for purposes of world building, all magic is made possible by the usage of these magical plants grown in marmud. This could include eating and drinking and smoking plants, turning them into lotions or dyes or paints, sewn as clothing, or constructed out of magical timbers or rope, etc. For example, travel across the Mar is only possible via ships constructed of the eyelash tree grown in marmud. The timbers of the eyelash tree can float upon the Mar, and the people of Atlantica call these specialized ships Mar cutters. Now, the greatest Marfarers are known as the Marfolk, who are actually called dwarves in many other worlds. Sometimes the Marfolk are called dwarves in Atlantica, but the Marfolk consider the term dwarf to be an offensive slur. Now, on Atlantica, dwarves, or Marfolk, if you will, rarely live underground and certainly rarely work in mines. Instead, they live mainly in port towns across the world, often on the Mar. They're, generally speaking, expert sailors and build the best Mar cutters in the world. Now, the Marfolk of Atlantica are also a people without a homeland. 7 centuries in the past, the Marfolk actually led a rebellion, which struck at the heart of an ancient and despotic empire, the Elf Empire, which stretched across much of the world and ruled many of the peoples of Atlantica, including Marfolk, humans, orcs, and others, with with a tyrannical reign. Now, after the Marfolk began the rebellion, humans and orcs rose up against their masters as well. But before the Elf Empire fell, they destroyed the home of the Marfolk. And so, thus, have the Marfolk been scattered across Atlantica ever since. Mainly, like I said, in communities in port cities, and generally speaking, ruled over by the kings of men or orcs. Now, this is a map of the Isles of Icaria, which once served as the heart of the Elf Empire. And Icaria consists of 4 main isles. The largest is Calamar, then Rienda. Afterwards, you have Trochea and Bochea in the northwest there. Now, politically, Icaria is fragmented into dozens of kingdoms, most of which are fairly small, but several orc kings lead rather significantly powerful states. Nearly all of the kingdoms of Icaria follow the same religion as well, the god of the orcs, whose priesthood is a very powerful force and is represented in large part to the populace by a stifling inquisition, which forbids almost all magic as work of necromancers. And in fact, those necromancers do serve as the chief antagonist to the orc kings of Icaria. Now, as the project unfolds, we're going to continue to discuss more of Atlantica's politics and peoples. But this episode, I really do want to focus on the Marfolk, on 4 specific locations on Icaria, and a group of 5 Marfolk NPC adventurers, which a group of PCs might encounter in their adventures in Atlantica. Now, our first location is Superbia, a small city-state on the coast of South Calamar. Superbia is ruled by a human king, though, like nearly all other states in Icaria, the only religion not outlawed is the worship of Elamush, the orc king, the orc god, pardon. And perhaps a quarter of the citizens of Superbia are in fact orcs or half-orcs. The city also has a very high population of Marfolk, owing to the fact that Superbia was an important naval base of the ancient Elf Empire, and in fact was the target of the army of the Marfolk in those days, when the rebellion began. Now, our next location, with that said, is Droka-Ra. Droka-Ra is the capital of an orc king on western Rienda. Orcs are more civilized, I should say, in Atlantica than many other fantasy settings. However, much like humans, still capable of terrible savagery. Now, the king of Droka-Ra in particular is very ambitious, even compared to some of his rivals, and has been willing to do almost anything to increase the power of his kingdom. Now, with that said, our third location is Emporium Faunus in the southeast of Rienda, which in the deserts of southern Rienda. Unlike nearly all other parts of Icaria, Emporium Faunus is ruled by a necromancer, who is in direct opposition to the realms of the orcs and men who follow the orc god, instead of submitting to the god of power Bezamon. Now, in some ways, the necromancers are far more evil than even the orc kings. I mean, they're literally, have undead servants and stuff. But in other ways, they're perhaps more civilized. They're less fearful of foreign magic and religion. And so Imperium Thonus, despite being ruled by a necromancer, is in some ways a jewel of knowledge and learning in Atlantica, a place where magic is accepted and thrives. Now, the community of Marfolk at Emporium Thonus follow Bezamon instead of Elamush, but they also retain trade contacts with the communities of Marfolk across Icaria and beyond, of course. Now, finally, our last hex map details a small island called the Isle of the Toro King. It's in the Ixothar Sea off the coast of South Calamar. Now, the Ixothar Sea, it lies largely south and west of Icaria, and in fact contains so many islands, both large and small, that altogether it really is considered by the people of Atlantica to be its own continent, the infinite Isles of Ixothar, which incidentally are not infinite, but like I said, are plentiful. Now, regardless to that, the Isle of the Toro King lies about 200 miles off the coast of South Calamar, and altogether, the island is a little less than 18 square miles. It's inhabited only by a small community of farmers and herders. But on the opposite end of the island is the ruined castle of an ancient king, the Toro King. More about them later. And the ruins of this ancient castle is perhaps awaiting the right adventuring party to reveal the treasures inside. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about these 4 hex maps, but for now, let's introduce our party of the NPC Marfolk. Now, I've statted them out at level 5 in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and these are literally the first characters I've ever made in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I've never played, and so they might not be the strongest in abilities, but with that said, I intend often to make characters who are more for roleplay purposes than just to have the highest stats and everything Anyway, the leader of this group of Marfolk is named Primo Tovar. Primo, or Lord Tovar if you prefer, is a Marfolk nobleman who dreams of a new homeland. And I should also mention for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, what I used for the Marfolk were the ancient blood dwarf ancestry. Anyway, now Primo shares, he dreams of a homeland for the Marfolk, a new homeland. And he shares this vision with one of his old teachers, his tutor, an alchemist who is named Otello de Martino. And they started talking about this one day after the two had gone off to Superbia, which is our location on the coast of South Calamar. And they are in Superbia for the most important holiday on the calendar of the Marfolk, which is every year on the 5th day of the Warrior, which is when the Marfolk of Atlantica celebrate Last March. Last March is a solemn holiday, and outside of Superbia, Marfolk gather every year on a pilgrimage to Superbia, where, those who can afford to go, they visit and take the Last March, which is the same march of the last army of the Marfolk. They took a hill nearby before besieging Superbia, or what would become Superbia, and besieging the army of the Elf Empire. They did this despite knowing their homeland had been destroyed by powerful magics the elves unleashed upon it. So the Last March, as the holiday goes, is a solemn remembrance. It's also a time when many Marfolk make vows. Primo Tovar vowed to find and build a homeland for the Marfolk. And being a nobleman, he decided to spend his fortune doing it. Now, Primo is statted as a bard in Pathfinder. Otello, the alchemist, decided to join him. And Now, Primo spends his fortune, the fortune of his nobility, mainly hiring the services of another marfolk. His name is Thamir Tazi. Thamir Tazi is a Marwright, and he constructs a Mar cutter to help enable Primo to finish up this goal. Now, Thamir vows to join Primo's quest, and with the funds, he builds a Mar cutter that he calls Lion's Mane. Now, Primo is statted, Thamir is statted as an inventor in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, with his emphasis being on vehicles. Now, with that said, so we've got 3 party members, a bard, an alchemist, and an inventor or a Marwright, which is one of the new classes that we're making here. But no adventuring party is really going to be complete without stout men-at-arms, or in this case, women-at-arms. Rosamond Pisciota is half of the group's muscle. She's a sailor and a warrior by trade. Luckily for Primo and the others, not only did she find his cause worthy, and she decided to take up Primo's quest, but Rosamund's wife is also an excellent warrior. Now, I've got Rosamund statted as a swashbuckler in Pathfinder, and her wife, Amelia Costa, is also a fierce warrior, but not necessarily a sailor by trade, and she's somewhat much more unsure of herself at sea. But she had also made a vow at last March. She vowed to never again stay home, while her wife Rosamund went sailing for weeks or months at end. Amelia is therefore the party's tank, and statted as a fighter. Now, with that said, that gives us our party, and perhaps a party of PCs might encounter Primo and his band because they need a vessel to travel on. And this could actually even work if you were looking for NPCs and you weren't even playing in Atlantica. You could, if your party needed, was looking for a passage somewhere, perhaps they find this party of dwarves on their ship and take passage on it. At any rate, so if the party needs a vessel to travel on, perhaps Primo and the Marfolk are who answer the call. Superbia might even work as a great campaign starter because the PCs are hired there by Primo as part of his crew, with the job of performing reconnaissance work on a location somewhere. Now, regardless, in the world of Atlantica setting, Primo and his band formed early in the spring season, like I said, on the 5th night of the Warrior, in the year 724 of the New Age, as part of their vows of the last march, inside a tavern by the wharf of Superbia. Now, from there, that party of Marfolk eventually makes their way to Droka Ra. And it's here they find very lucrative employment from one of the princes of the realm. That prince employs the party to build him a Mar cutter. The prince in question is growing a navy, and he uses that navy to send his knights out as privateers, robbing and enslaving their way across the Mar. More on that in a later episode. But as for Primo and his crew, well, they spend the fortnight of Elf Queen in the summer of 724 of the New Age, working for the Orc Prince, and make a fortune by their standards, delivering him a fine vessel. Now, an adventuring party looking to build a good Mar cutter might encounter Primo and his crew at Droka Ra or elsewhere, while looking for a Marwright to build a vessel, and thus be introduced to Thamir Tazi, the Marwright, and the others. Or perhaps in a different world than Atlantica, same thing, just with a normal ship or a really well-made ship. This is the group that you would find to do that. Now, at any rate, the reason Primo and his crew took the job, in large part, was to pay the extraordinary fees associated with their intended visit to the royal libraries at Emporium Thaunis, our 3rd location. Now, Emporium Thaunis is really little more than a foothold on Icaria for a much larger and more powerful empire, that of the great necromancer. But in total, that empire stretches across a great portion of the world of Atlantica. The libraries at Emporium Thanos, as a result, contain books and information which simply does not exist, or if it does exist, exists in secret in the orc-dominated parts of Icaria, where a lot of magical knowledge is forbidden and looked out for by the Orc Inquisition. So a party of PCs in Atlantica, they might encounter Primo and his crew at Imperium Thanos, or the library there, during the fortnight of Spider in the autumn of 724, which is when the adventurers will spend researching. They spend that fortnight researching, in the library for a weapon or some sort of tool that'll give them the power for Primo to achieve his dream. Once again, a new homeland for the Marfolk. Now, finally, our last location, which is when Primo and his party, with their newfound knowledge learned in the libraries, head for the Isle of the Toro King, searching after a legend of a powerful artifact still perhaps buried somewhere in the ruins of the old castle. And so a party of PCs might encounter Primo and his band because, like earlier, this could be the location they're hired to explore on Primo's behalf. But alternatively, Primo and his band might represent a rival adventuring party for the PCs, with both groups looking to explore the same castle ruins. At any rate, Primo and his crew arrive off the coast of the Isle of the Toro King on the eve of the fortnight of Broken Star, in the year 724. Now, for old school Essentials play, the World of Atlantica Discord contains, like I said, 3 new classes. The Marfolk, which is an adaptation of the Dwarf race as class in the base rules. The Marfolk Alchemist, which works in great part, to the alchemy rules, which are presented in Carcass Crawler issue number 4, published by Necrotic Gnome. And finally, the Marfolk Marwright, which is a class based around captaining a Marcutter and building the Marcutter and everything. At any rate, in addition, like I said, there's also the free continent map of Icaria, the 4 hex maps. I just mentioned the 3 old school Essentials classes, and 5 Ancient Blood Dwarf NPCs for Pathfinder 2e. Those are all free. If you want to check those out, head on over to the World of Atlantica Discord, linked below. Thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you around. Peace.